That was Josie Moran. Let's talk to Noreena Hertz, who is author of The Lonely Sentry and is on the line. Morning to you.
Morning, Justin.
And I suppose the first point is that really essential one. This is not about the lockdown and about coronavirus, although you certainly cover that. This is something that already existed.
Yes, even before the coronavirus struck, we had built a lonely world, the scale of which really cannot be overstated. In the United Kingdom, 1 in 5 adults said before lockdown that they felt lonely most or all of the time. 1 in 8 Brits didn't have a single friend that they could rely on. 60% of employees felt lonely at work. In America, lonely people are paying to be cuddled, paying to rent friends because they're so craving intimacy. And it's a crisis that, of course, is affecting our health, our physical health, as well as our mental health. It's affecting our economy, costing the National Health Service over £2 billion a year. But it's also affecting our democracy. And my research uncovered a really troubling and significant link between the rise of populism in recent years and the rise in loneliness.
Just on that last point, I mean, it certainly is evidence, isn't there, that in the United States and possibly here, men who hate women, kind of groups of people, individual people who are miserable and who take it out on other people are often themselves lonely. In other words, they're not just victims, they're also victimizers.
Yes, well, since 1992, we've seen research that shows a link between people who feel socially isolated and people voting for populist parties. If you look at Trump voters versus Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders voters in 2016, Trump voters had less close friends and were more likely to say that they could only rely on themselves.
Yeah. Well, it has to be said, plenty of Trump voters are perfectly sociable people with ordinary lives. I mean, it's not. It's a bit more than that, isn't it? We're talking about extremes.
More than that because it's also feeling lonely in a more existential sense, a feeling of being abandoned, forgotten, forsaken, not only by friends and family, but also by politicians.
And on that,
politicians play to that.
Yeah, on that, you talked right at the beginning about the society we had built, being a lonely society. And yet, of course, it is also a fantastically connected society.
Ah, yes, the irony. So smartphones and social media, actually, it turns out, are a big part of the problem. We are perma-connected, yet we're perma-distracted, together yet alone. But mass migration to cities, a neoliberal mindset. We've become a more selfish society. Even if you look at pop songs, lyrics, and how they've evolved over the last few decades, words like we, us, and our, increasingly supplanted by I, me, and my.
Right.
And yet there's so much we can do to address the loneliness crisis.
I was going to say, in self-mocking terms, you've got 20 seconds to tell us what we can do, but take a bit longer if you must. But, I mean, where do we start, do you think?
Well, I think governments need to take this issue really seriously. I think social media clearly is part of the problem. Social media companies are in many ways the tobacco industry of the 21st century. And I would advocate banning addictive social media for under 16s. Governments need to commit to investing in the infrastructure of community. We've seen libraries close down, 800 since 2008, a third of youth clubs closed down. People need physical spaces where they can come together and be together. And we can also take perhaps right now our cue from Norway, which has just announced that it's going to have a very significant injection of funds in its 2021 budget to tackle the increase in loneliness and isolation due to the coronavirus and lockdown.
Noreena Hertz, author of The Lonely Sentry. Thank you very much.
29 minutes past 8 and Gary's here.